Everyone was stunned a few days ago when Attorney General Eric Holder intervened in a gay couple's deportation case. The government was about to deport Paul Wilson Dorman, but at the last minute, Holder told the Board of Immigration Appeals to take a closer look at the case. That's made the complicated rules about separating binational LGBT couples even more complicated. So we're going to talk to Lavi Solloway, the lawyer for another binational couple facing deportation. Velandia and Josh Vandiver had a deportation hearing one day after Holder's decision, but that decision changed everything. Lavi's going to take us inside the court and tell us exactly what happened. So we're talking to Lavi Solloway. Lavi is the founder of Stop the Deportations and Immigration Equality, and he represents Josh Vandiver and Velandia. So Lavi, let's talk about what happened in the end of last week. It was a lot changed very quickly. What exactly did Attorney General Eric Holder do on Thursday?
Well, we learned on Thursday that the Attorney General intervened in a case involving a gay couple that had entered into a civil union in the state of New Jersey and had applied for a certain kind of relief from deportation or removal, known as cancellation of removal. And that's a specific form of legal status, a specific process for individuals who are facing deportation but have been in the United States for 10 years or more, and whose deportation would cause exceptional and extremely unusual hardship to usually to their spouse or to their child. In this case, the couple seems to have argued that their civil union should count as a marriage, and therefore that the American partner in the civil union should be considered for the hardship that it would cause to him if the foreign partner was in fact deported. That case actually was brought in early 2009 in a New Jersey immigration court. It was denied. They then appealed it to the Board of Immigration Appeals. It was denied, and they appealed that to the Third Circuit. And the Attorney General, what he specifically did was that he vacated or set aside the decision made by the Board of Immigration Appeals. He seemed dissatisfied with their decision and directed them to answer specific questions and therefore to decide the case again.
So something that I'm hearing from our opponents is that, in essence, in this decision, he's not enforcing DOMA, and he's trying to sabotage DOMA, and he's trying to act as though DOMA doesn't exist. Is that accurate, or is that a misreading of what he decided?
Well, let me say first, it's not surprising that we would hear these kinds of misleading statements from folks on the right. They're obviously looking for any opportunity to suggest that the administration is not enforcing the law. It couldn't be farther from the truth. This action to set aside the decision of the Board of Immigration Appeals does not suggest in any way the outcome that the Attorney General is looking for. He's simply asking the Board of Immigration Appeals to create a better record and to address certain issues. Does not imply that he knows the answers to those questions or that the Board of Immigration Appeals knows the answers to those questions, and they're all going to end up going to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, where I suppose, ironically for the folks on the right, the Speaker of the House will most likely end up defending the Defense of Marriage Act in that appeal. So no, this is not an end run around DOMA, as Family Research Council has said. What this is precisely is the Attorney General is looking at the facts of this case. It doesn't involve a marriage. It involves a civil union. And what he's trying to do is determine whether or not there are issues that relate to the constitutionality of DOMA that arise out of a case where a couple's claiming right to benefits on the basis of their civil union. And he wants the Board of Immigration Appeals to consider whether or not a partner in a civil union in a state like New Jersey, where civil unions are the virtual equivalent of marriage, whether that partner could be considered a spouse, and what does DOMA have to say about that? So this is absolutely not a question of not enforcing DOMA. This is the Attorney General's job as the head of the Department of Justice. The Board of Immigration Appeals is a part of the Department of Justice. This is about preparing the record for an eventual appeal at the Third Circuit Court of Appeals.
And so now, Henry and Josh had a hearing on Friday, and their circumstances are a little bit different because they have a marriage instead of a civil union. What exactly happened when you went into the federal building on Friday, and was it what you were expecting, or were you surprised?
Sure. Well, let me say first that in the weeks leading up to Friday's hearing, we were certainly hopeful that the Immigration and Customs Enforcement prosecuting attorney would, try to forge some kind of compromise that would postpone the proceedings. And we weren't successful. We asked the government to consider terminating the proceedings, or at the very least postponing them, and we were turned down. Our argument was that since Josh's marriage-based petition for Henry was still pending and hadn't been denied, the most appropriate thing would be to allow the Immigration Service to do its job to process that petition, and if it ultimately deemed it appropriate to deny it, then we would know that, but that we shouldn't proceed until that happened. And then we went to court on Friday. Really, it was a cliffhanger. We had no expectation at that point that the government would have changed their position, and we also hadn't heard, anything positive from the judge. We actually asked the judge as well to adjourn the case, and prior to Friday, the judge had not agreed to adjourn the case. But when we got to court on Friday, it was clear that both the judge and the government attorney had a change of heart. And the judge indicated to the government attorney that he had decided that it was appropriate to adjourn the case because Josh and Henry had a pending marriage-based petition, and also brought to the attention of the government potential implications of the Attorney General's decision with respect to the other couple, in the sense that we don't really know what the outcome of that case will be, whether it will bear on Josh and Henry's case. And so given all of that, it was appropriate then to adjourn, and the government agreed. The government agreed it was appropriate to adjourn. And Josh and Henry are now required to return to court in December.
So what is their life going to look like from now until December? Are they just going to be waiting around, or are they still going to be very busy?
Well, certainly there's an emotional component to this process, and they walked out of court on Friday breathing a huge sigh of relief, but their relief is going to be short-lived because, clearly come December 16th, they still have to face the judge and still have to, deal with this constant problem of deportation. But between now and then, they will continue to do the advocacy work that they've been doing and continue to urge the administration to halt the deportations of all spouses of gay and lesbian Americans, and try to expand the growing coalition of organizations that they've really brought into being with their incredible determination and their persistence, telling their story, and sort of getting out there and putting a face on this issue. So they're going to continue to do that. They have 7 months to bring about some real meaningful change, and meaningful change for binational couples facing deportation would be a moratorium.
You mentioned that they were going to be doing a lot of advocacy work. What sort of form does that take?
Well, the most important thing right now is to really try to broaden the support for a moratorium beyond the 60-odd members of the House and Senate who have written to Napolitano to try to increase that number. And so individuals who live in districts where their representatives or senators have not called on the administration yet to implement interim remedies to protect binational couples should certainly do so. All binational couples should be out there telling their stories to elected officials. We need not only legislative solutions in the form of repeal of DOMA and passing Uniting American Families Act, but we also need immediate solutions to make sure that the Henrys of the world are not deported while we're working on long-term solutions. So it'll be focusing on putting more pressure on the administration, directing that to Secretary Napolitano, who ultimately has the authority to determine how the resources of Immigration and Customs Enforcement are deployed. Today, the President made a speech on the importance of comprehensive immigration reform and emphasized that it's a priority of this administration to deport convicted felons and those who put our safety in jeopardy, our security in jeopardy. And secondly, he emphasized that it is important that our laws keep families together. And so, this president clearly is in alignment with our goals, and we need those words to be followed by action. So Josh and Henry will be working with the other binational couples who are facing deportation over the next few months to raise the profile of this issue, both for the White House and for the Department of Homeland Security, to try to achieve a concrete solution.
So if people want to learn more, they want to help out, where should they go?
Well, the first place to go would be stopthedeportations.com. We're really invite binational couples to tell their stories and to join us in our efforts to organize. There are other wonderful organizations out there that are doing really important work. Get Equal helped us tremendously organize a rally to protest Henry's deportation outside of the courthouse on Friday. Out for Immigration and Immigration Equality, have been working for years on the legislative aspect of this and have also turned to the issue of deportations. So, to get involved, you can certainly contact us at stopthedeportations@gmail.com. And we'd be happy to direct you to whichever organization or, to help you tell your story.
Okay, great. Well, Lavi Solloway is the founder of Immigration Equality and Stop the Deportations, and he represents Josh Vandiver and Henry Velandia. Lavi, thank you so much for joining us and explaining this complicated and fast-moving issue.
My pleasure, Matt.